Hey Amarillo, I'm Skylar Gallup, and you're listening to Hey Amarillo, the interview podcast featuring some of the most interesting people and stories of Amarillo, Texas. We record every week at Amarillo College's Innovation Outpost. The IO supports education, workforce development, and industry growth by inspiring and facilitating innovation in the Texas Panhandle. Today's guest is Sharon Miner. Sharon is the Director of Development for Martha's Home, a local women's shelter, but that title does not quite encapsulate the depth of work and impact she has there and for her ladies, as she calls them. Sharon also worked for an international business consultant, was a longtime staffer of beloved former state senator Till Bivens, and ran Leadership Amarillo Canyon through a very tumultuous time. There is a lot covered in our conversation, but I think the through line you'll find is that Sharon just rolls her sleeves up and gets to work where and how she can, and she empowers those around her to do the same. Here's Sharon. Sharon Miner, welcome to the Hey Amarillo podcast.
Thank you for having me, Skylar. I'm very excited to be here. I'm excited. It's going to be great.
I am also really looking forward to the conversation. You're one of those people that feels like they have packed at least three, at least professional lifetimes into one. So I'm excited to touch on what is a really, really deep deck of experience. But first, I'd like to start by asking you the same question I ask all my guests, and that is, what brought you here? What's your origin story to get you here today?
Goodness gracious. You mean to Amarillo, right? Is that what you're asking
ma'am.
me? Okay, good. Because, well, when I was in high school, my father was stationed at Cannon Air Force Base right there in Clovis, New Mexico, okay? And so this is how I chose a college, all right? Where is a college that's close enough that if I get in trouble, I can get home within 2 hours, but yet I can still feel like I'm far away, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I chose West Texas.
There you go. There you go.
That's how I got here. And then I ended up just sticking around. So, you know.
So you moved here to attend West Texas A&M.
Except at the time, it was West Texas State University.
Right.
Yeah.
What did you study?
I was studying nursing. But then I realized I did not like the sight of blood. And then I changed to political science.
Political science. And, well, I guess lucky to learn that you don't like the sight of blood. They're in your undergrad.
Yeah. It was real early. I mean, it was like I don't know, it just like hit me. It was like, what are you doing? You know?
This is not for
what
you.
You want to do.
Was it like a dramatic, like passing out, or just like...
No, it was just a thought more than anything.
Okay.
You know, one of those things. You know, I really did have a very horrible experience at West Texas State University.
Really?
My first time around, yeah. And I think that had a lot to do with it, and just you know, a lot of things were just crazy because I didn't end up staying. I ended up quitting, and you know, just without going into a whole lot of detail.
Sure.
You know, this was, of course, in 1977, so it's been a while. But, you know, my first hour on campus, you know, well, I did what I thought everybody did when you went to college. You join a sorority, right? So I had sent in all my stuff early and all of that wonderful stuff. But then I hadn't even been on campus an hour. And the president of the Pananalytics Association came and knocked on my door. No hello, no welcome to WT. It was just, are you Sharon Taylor at the time? And I said, yes. She said, well, I need to let you know we don't let blacks in our sororities. Okay, so, you know, that was a defining moment in my life because my mom and dad had always told us we were no different than anybody else, no better than anybody else, and nobody else was better than us, you know. So anyway, it was just kind of a traumatic experience for me, you know. Now, and what would happen is I made a decision. I thought, well, you know, because the woman had said, if you want to go ahead and go through Rush, you can go ahead and see if anybody picks you up, okay? And I was sitting there and I was thinking, you know, this is a public university. They can't do that, you know? So I went ahead and made the decision that I would go through Rush. And when I got there, there was about 400 or 500 women in this room. Back then, sororities were big. They had 5 sororities on campus at the time. And so there were a lot of women in this room. You know, you got to sign in. And so you go up to the table. My name was not on the list. And she said, go ahead and go in. You know, so I went ahead and went in. Well, when the lady stood up on the stage, the very first thing she said was, if your name is not on the list, you have to leave the room. Well, myself and one other Black lady left. And it was one of those situations where I think I was in shock more than anything, you know. But, you know, God is so good to me. I tell people all the time that I'm his favorite because the young lady that was also asked to leave, we were walking back to our dorms, you know. And what was so fascinating, Skylar, was she was so relaxed. She was so calm. She was so casual. And she was just asking me questions about myself, asking me, you know, where I was from and all of those wonderful things, you know, just making light conversation. And then she went to her dorm and I went to mine, you know, and it was just kind of over. Well, long story short, I'm really summing a lot of stuff up. I would go to class, okay, and I would see women who were in that room that when that lady said if you were not on the list that you had to leave the room.
Yeah.
I know that there were other women who noticed that there were only 2 Black women who had to
who
get
they
up.
were excluding.
Exactly, who they were excluding, you
Yeah.
know. And so anyway, it was always so, I don't know, I just looked around and I just kept thinking nobody thought anything was wrong with that. So it became impossible for me to stay there at WT. You know, I think I stayed 1 semester and then I went ahead and you know, quit school, you know?
Yeah.
But subsequently, what was so cool about the whole story, it really, I'm just amazed at this. The newspaper at the time, I don't know how this happened or whatever, had gotten a hold of the story of some kind of way. And it had been, I don't know, a year and a half after it had happened. You know?
Wow.
And I had mentioned to them that Angela was the girl's name, you know, walked with me and all of that stuff. Well, when they went to search for Angela, there was nobody named Angela in that dorm. Okay, so there's that, you know. And I can remember just thinking, well, that's awfully, awfully strange, you know.
Sure.
But one time I was just praying in my own quiet time and just asking the Lord about all of that. And, you know, I felt like I heard the Spirit of the Lord say to me, that was me in the flesh, so you wouldn't have to walk alone. You know, now that's my experience. You know, people can believe whatever they want to believe. But here's what's so fabulous about the whole story. If you go to the old main building today, you will see Sharon Miner's picture up there as a distinguished alumni from West Texas A&M University. You know, so it came full circle. You know? And
isn't that interesting?
Isn't that crazy? And then in my professional life, I was speaking at an event, you know, and this was literally years later. Yeah. And a lady came up to me afterwards because I had told that story during the speaking event. And a lady came up to me afterwards with tears in her eyes. And she said, I was in that room. And she said, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. And I'm just like, wow, you know. Anyway, that's how my life goes.
I was going to say, you know, Sharon, you and I know each other relatively well. And you sharing that story, you've acted as a mentor to me in many ways. And that really is just at the base of your personality and the way that you approach walking in this world. You know, and I think that's such a powerful story. And I wonder, did that tenacity develop from that experience? Or was it there previously?
I think it was there previously.
Yeah.
But I think it grew from that experience. Yeah. Because, you know, I think it was always in the back of my mind, if that makes any sense at all. Because listen, you know, what I tell people so many times is it's one thing to be discriminated against. It's another to be discriminated against something that you can't change about yourself. They literally told me it was because of the color of my skin. Right. It didn't have anything to do with my grades. It didn't have anything to do with what my parents did. None of that. It was literally because of what they saw. And that'll mess with you. And so you have to continually work through that. And even to this day, okay, something will be on TV, or you'll hear something, or you'll see something, and it will remind you. And what you have to do is you have to always constantly remind yourself, wait a second, what they think about me is a lie. It's really, really strange. And I think it has really, really helped me be so determined. And also, I get really, really upset when people become judgmental.
Sure.
When people say things about women in addiction, or people who are homeless, or all kinds of situations, if you want to see the hair on my neck go up, judge people. Just judge them based on stuff that you don't know nothing about them. I just have issues with that. So
that's right.
It definitely impacted me very, very, very much. Impacted decisions that I made. I had always thought that I would go to undergrad at WT and then go to law school. Well, that isn't how it went down. And
so what did you do? So when you walked out or were pushed out, of WT, what did you do next?
Well, I went back home to mom and dad, safe place.
Yeah.
Went to my safe place. My mom and dad were always my safe place. And I just worked and, did stuff and all of that kind of stuff. That was it. And then a couple of years after that, I made a decision to move back to Amarillo, So I came back to Amarillo and worked and, did a lot of stuff and a lot of different jobs and had fun and had friends and, had a good time. So
how did we get to the political science major?
Oh my gosh. In 7th grade, Skylar, I always had an interest in politics. It was just always there. Don't know why. I always knew who the president was. I always knew political stuff that was going on. And so when I did eventually go back, it was political science that I wanted to do. But what was fascinating before that, my entry into political science or into working for an elected official was my best friend married the best friend of the state representative at the time. And I remember one day we were all over at their house and everything like that. And I was sitting there and I was talking about, I got to go home because I got to type up my resume so I can, find a job, And he said to me, you know how to type? And I said, yes.
Yes.
And then I ended up going to work for a state representative in Texas, here. Mm-hmm.
Who was the rep?
Yeah, it was a guy by the name of Chip Stannis Wallace.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was one of the first Republicans ever elected up here in this area. This was when Amarillo was still, a lot of Democrats were still around.
Yeah, the state was flipping then.
But that's who I was working for then.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you start working for an elected representative. Where did you go from there?
Well, from there, there's just so much, but I won't go into all of those details. But then after that, I did go back to school. Okay, I went back to school and all of that.
At WT?
It was West Texas A&M now. Yes. And it was just at the most incredible time that I went back to school because I was already married and we had our son. He was 6 months old and all of that stuff. And so the Lord made it to where I could go back to school. So I went back to school to finish up my political science degree. And it was during that time that an internship became available for Congressman Mac Thornberry. Yeah. And so I took that internship as part of my, school and all of that stuff for political science.
So you went to D.C. with a 6-month-old?
No. here in his Amarillo office.
Okay. I was like, whoa, sister.
No. Oh, Lord, no.
Okay. Still though. An internship.
As part of my curriculum for Congressman Mac Thornberry, whom I miss dearly. He's a wonderful man.
Yeah.
And so anyway, during that time, one of the ladies, or his chief of staff, I think at the time, Brent, had said, Sharon, there's a position that's coming open. Would you be kind of interested in, this position and stuff like that? And I had asked him, I said, well, who is it for? And he said, well, I'm not at liberty to say who it's for right now, but, would you be interested in it? And so anyway, I said, I don't know. I said, let me go talk to my husband. So anyway, I was talking to my husband because my state representative experience did not end, so lovely. Let's just put it that way, Okay. So I was just kind of shy about working for another elected official.
Okay.
And so my husband, I just love Jerry Miner. He says to me, because I tell him about the job. I said, I don't know who it is, blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, what are you going back to school for? It's a political job. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And it made me stop for a minute, So anyway, long story short, I went and I told Brent, Congressman Thornberry's staff person, I'd be interested. And it turned out to be Senator Teal Bivens' office. And I got the job. And that was another defining moment in my life. See, I get teared up. That completely changed the trajectory of everything that I am right now because of that man and his family. And it was just an incredible opportunity that, I don't know, it was just an incredible opportunity.
I know that your time with the Bivens was really impactful on you. And I also know that I think for some people who maybe have never known an elected official personally or worked in that capacity, especially in today's climate, there's this idea that they're all bad guys. And I know that that was not your experience.
Not even remotely.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about
I think it really makes me sad that the political climate that we're in these days, because that's why nothing gets done.
Yeah.
It's because, everybody thinks everybody's the devil. And that's so far from the truth, But my experience working for Senator Bivens was one of, let me just put it this way, our staff was so diverse, okay? Our chief of staff Senator Bivens was one of the most conservative Republicans, this, in the state of Texas, and our chief of staff was one of the most liberal Democrats. Well, Senator Bivens didn't hire us for our political affiliation.
Yeah.
He hired us for our brains, for our knowledge, and what we could do, And so for me, I was just honored to be a part of that staff because I'm like, well, these people are brilliant. And then there's me, But I learned so much from them and so much from him. And he was a great man. He just was a great man. It was an incredible opportunity. So I wish everybody had that opportunity to know that what they see now is just, it doesn't even make sense to me. It just doesn't even make sense. So, but he was good.
The idea that you stack a staff with people that are not like-minded to you is a strong one. And I think that's applicable not only in, a member's office, but in our boardrooms, in our C-suites, in in everything that we do. If everybody around the table feels, thinks, looks, walks the same, that's a problem.
It is, Skylar, because, here's the thing. You don't know everything, and I don't know everything. I don't know what you know. You don't know what I know. But one of the most incredible opportunities that I had working for Senator Bivens is he, for some crazy reason, ended up being on the Senate Criminal Justice Committee. Now, he was chairman of the Education Committee, but one of his other committee assignments was criminal justice. And I got to be the person who staffed that, of all things, which was just crazy. It was just crazy, one of those crazy things. But one of the most incredible experiences, though, was whenever all of the staff of the senators on the committee would get together prior to a committee meeting and go over the legislation that the senators were going to be considering, And so you had the Democrats were in charge, pretty much. They had, I think the chairman of the committee was a Democrat, But anyway, we had the Democrats and the Republicans coming together, and we talk over a piece of legislation. And nobody was calling anybody a blankety blank, 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 or cussing or anything like that. We were just laying out the pros and cons of each legislation and then taking it back to our senators. And the collaboration and the creativity and just the conversation was powerful in itself, because there were people from Houston didn't see things the way people from Amarillo saw it.
Nor should they.
That's right.
Right.
But we always came somewhere in the middle to make the best legislation for the people of the state of Texas, And that was a cool thing. That was cool.
A cool thing that I'm not sure occurs. At least as much, certainly.
Exactly.
As it did when you experienced it.
It was fun. It was really fun. And then, from working from Senator Bivens, I ended up being, he went on to be ambassador to Sweden.
Yeah.
And I went on to be executive director of Leadership Amarillo and Canyon. And
a very impactful program. When you got the organization, it was in hard times.
Yeah,
correct?
They were having some trouble.
Yeah.
They had been through like 3 executive directors in a year.
Yeah. That's tough. That's not good.
It was not good. There were some people who were about to ask for their money back. I took over like in a mid-leadership year and everything like that. And, fortunately enough, though, we were able to get it turned around. And now, Lisa Blake is doing wonderful things.
That's right.
But when I was executive director, it wasn't pretty.
And it's really hard. I mean, I think a lot of like organizational change or building organizations is, if you've not kind of like been in the trenches, like just saying it's really hard doesn't quite do it justice.
No, it doesn't.
And it's hard. Not. It's even harder to be successful, right? It's even hard to do it poorly. But to then be able to turn around and say, yeah, we were able to turn that organization around, that doesn't happen just by happenstance.
No,
and so
it doesn't.
What do you think was the sauce around, like, I believe you were put there in a moment when your skill set was what was needed, and probably the team around you and all that. So what do you think in retrospect resulted in a successful kind of righting of the boat over there?
Well, this is something that I tell everybody. I have a dear, dear, dear friend named Susan Winger, who I tell everybody they need to get him a Susan Winger, because I met her literally from Congressman Mac Thornberry's office. And we have been dear friends ever since. But you got to have somebody that you can cry to. You got to have somebody who, when you say, oh my God, I'm just going to quit, and she would always tell me this. Sharon, nothing has come easy for you. You've never been placed in easy. That's not ever going to happen to you. But she was always that compass that was always right beside me, And I mean, she was on the board. She was at every day, and just always there, And I just think that it's that tenacity that we talked about. I think that flared up, and I just thought, no, wait a second. God set me on this job. And listen, I'm not kidding you. 6 months after I'd taken the job, one of the board members had come and said, Sharon, you might want to be looking for another job. Oof. Because I don't know that Leadership Amarillo and Canyon's going to make it, And I remember thinking, no, wait a second, it ain't going down like that. And so we pushed forward. Now listen, it wasn't overnight. it wasn't 6 months later. It was constantly working at it until the year that I left, we finally had a waiting list for people to go through the program. We finally got a huge golf tournament.
Okay.
We were the recipients of that. Things just turned around very quickly. And then it was right after that I ended up going to work for an international business consultant of all things.
Because life is funny.
Oh my gosh, And then I find myself traveling all over the United States of America with this international business consultant.
So now, just a note to the listener, this is about life 4 that I referred to earlier.
Exactly.
I don't think you're quite to the 9.
That's right. Not yet.
But it's many. So you're traveling with this.
This international business consultant and helping him write his books and stuff like that. And we're doing developments for companies like Kraft and PetSmart. And I'm just going, this is crazy, And listen, I love Palo Duro Canyon. But companies like Kraft don't have their retreats, their C-suite retreats at places like Palo Duro Canyon. And so I went to places that I had never even heard of. And I'll never forget, we had one that we did in Miami, of all places, And Miami's an interesting city in itself.
It is.
But anyway, so we're at this hotel and everything like that. And I called, the guy's name is Sam Silverstein. He was the guy I worked for. I called Sam on the phone and I said, Sam, my hotel room has got 2 bathrooms in it, 2 full bathrooms in it, And he goes, really? And I said, yes. He goes, mine only has 1. I said, oh, okay, well, listen, So anyway, he goes, wait. And he opens a door in his hotel room and he goes, I've got 2 bathrooms too. It's just crazy stuff like that.
How perfect.
They just didn't spare any expense. And so I only say that because for me, I'm just going, wow. Just wow. So anyway, we ended up writing the Happy State Bank story, non-negotiable. I had met J. Pat Hickman before. But that gave me the opportunity to really get to know that man. And golly, I miss him. He had such an impact on my life and just his story. And so anyway, that's how all of that came about, And then the next thing I know is I'm working at Martha's home. I'm like, okay, this is good. And the reason why I laugh about that is because Martha's home is a temporary shelter for women and women with children who find themselves homeless. Okay.
Maybe other women for whom things have never been made easy.
Exactly. Exactly. And I would always think, Skylar, what do I know that can help these ladies? I got to tell you, I have a different perspective now on homelessness, on struggles, because when you see it from the political side, if that makes any sense at all.
Well, your time on the criminal justice, working the criminal justice, that's pretty impactful and eye-opening and complex and incredibly critical.
That's right. That's right. And I also handled health and human services for him during that time.
Yeah.
And so it just gave me a different perspective, on life. I will never forget, one day there was a lady who walked into Senator Bivens' office, okay? And this was in the district office. And Skylar, she just had a smell to her that lingered in the room. And so when she was talking to me, I couldn't even focus on her and what she was saying because the smell was so overwhelming, And then when she left, I got a can of Lysol and started spraying it and everything like that. Well, subsequent later, I was thinking about that. And I remember, just praying, and just saying, God, I'm so sorry. You know, I was just repentant, for having not given that lady the attention that she needed. And I asked the Lord to give me another chance.
Mm.
Well, guess what? 2 weeks later, she came back in. Same lady, dressed exactly the same way. And this time I heard her message. And she said, you tell Senator Bivens, one man can make a difference. And when I shared that with him, he had tears in his eyes because he had just become chairman of the Senate Finance Committee.
Yep.
And it wasn't easy. And, and so that has always had an impact on me because one man, one woman, all she did was spoke some words, okay? And it made a difference. It made a difference. Made a difference in my life. I'll never forget it.
No.
And so we have the ability and the power to change lives. And it doesn't necessarily mean we got to give people $1 million. You don't have to pay for it. Sometimes it's just telling somebody, you can do this, and then watch and see if they'll take off, So anyway, it's just, I have a ton of stories, and we could spend 6 weeks just talking about all of the different things. But being at Martha's home was when I really, really realized that they have to have a livable wage.
Man. Yep.
And there is no way on this earth that we can sustain as a nation, as a community, as anything, if people are on government assistance. Yeah. It was never supposed. Government, by its design, is a reactive body, not a proactive body. They don't sit around and think about the future. They're always reacting to the next problem, And I just remember thinking while I was at Martha's home, we've got to find a way. We've got to find a way to help these ladies, not just get the resources that they need and, so they can stay on HUD housing. That's and all right, of this stuff, but what can we do to move them past where they are? And that's what's been the most fun for me at Martha's home, is literally watching that happen.
And how do you approach that, Sharon? It's generational poverty. It's generational lack of educational attainment, generational, as you're saying, it goes so much further than me dropping my kids' grown out clothes off.
Exactly.
And so how do you, who's watching these women walk in and out of your doors every day, how do you approach trying to get to a place where you're not just housing, but you're setting women up for success that they've not ever had access to previously because of systems?
Yeah, exactly. First of all, we got to debunk the myth of what homelessness is. We think that it's only socioeconomic. Sometimes we think it's a certain color. We think they're all addicts.
Drugs,
we just have a multitude of things of what we think. And people don't realize that there literally are times where people just find themselves without family. Period. And somebody has dropped them off. Domestic violence is a big one. Just all kinds of things. But what we have to understand is that everybody is uniquely an individual. And so what might work for you, Skylar, might take 6 months for me to get, okay? Sure. Because, I had a young man tell me one time, he says, people are always talking about that marijuana is the gateway drug.
Sure.
He said, that's not true. He said, trauma is the gateway drug. And so what you have to be able to do is to, first of all, recognize that just because someone is homeless, that they're dealing with the same thing. They are not.
Yeah.
They are not. Or just because someone's homeless, that they don't love their kids, or whatever crazy stuff we come up with.
Yeah.
So what you have to be able to do is you have to be able to recognize and figure out, okay, what has happened that has disrupted their pathway to whatever their path is. Listen, not everybody's going to get a 4-year university. A 4-year degree. Not everybody wants that. But you know what? Some ladies don't know that they can come right here to Amarillo College, go for 12 weeks for a certification, get a job making $25 an hour with benefits. They don't know what they don't know.
That's right.
And so what we did was we came up with a program called Present Needs, Future Success. Because listen, if you're homeless, we're going to make sure you get some shoes on your feet. Mm-hmm. We're going to make sure we put a sandwich in your belly. We're going to make sure that you have a place to sleep, okay? But we're not leaving you there. We are going to let you get settled for about 30 days. We'll give you time to kind of, get your act together, because just being homeless is traumatic. And so we'll give you some time, but then our question is going to be, where did you leave off in school? What was your last education attainment? And our average age of women is about 35 years old, which is young if you really think about it. Yeah, it's 35 years old. But we have several older women who don't have their GED. So we help them get their GED.
Step one.
And then the next thing you know, they're at Amarillo College, and they never thought they would. Or somebody who is just computer illiterate. And I don't mean it, now they know how to use a cell phone, but they don't know nothing about the computer. Well, we're going to put you in a computer skills class. Yeah. Well, they get in a computer skills class. Next thing you know, they're at Amarillo College. And when I first went to work at Martha's Home, there was about 3% of our women who were going back to school. Today, at this moment, 95% of the women at Martha's Home is in school, whether that's WT, AC, Innovation Outpost.
Right.
We've got them taking a GED class, computer skills. We've got to move them past being on government assistance. And so, back to your question about how do you identify them, they identify themselves. Think about that. Because some people can't recognize an opportunity that's put before them. But then we have people like my friend Beth, who Beth would not mind me telling you her name. Okay. But Beth is someone who was homeless. She lived in a tent 4 years ago, out by Lowe's, out there on Tascosa Road. And today, she's in 3 honor societies at Amarillo College, has a 4.0, and just got accepted to the University of Texas at Arlington.
Wow.
Yeah.
How much of that is Beth, and how much of that is Martha's Home? I'll
tell you, I'm going to say 95% of it is Beth. And let me tell you why.
It's amazing.
Because Beth was one of those girls who, when the opportunity arose, when she heard about it, she was pregnant when she came to Martha's Home. And she's laying up in that bed, having a baby at the hospital, talking about, I'm ready to start school. I'm ready to start school. She was one who recognized that opportunity and was like, I'm taking it, and she took it. Yeah. And it has changed the trajectory of her children's lives as well. And I'm here to tell you, she'll never be homeless again because she's never going back. She knows. And so she called me up one day because I love to keep in touch with my ladies and stuff who want to keep in touch with me. I don't force it. But anyway, she calls me up and she's Miss Sharon, which is weird when they call me Miss Sharon. But she was like, Miss Sharon, she said, I got accepted into another honor society. And she said, I want to just tell you thank you, And I said, why are you thanking me? I said, C's get degrees too. I wasn't sitting up there in that class. I said, I got a degree, but mine was with C's, and I'm proud of them. C's get degrees too. And she said, no, she started laughing and she said, you don't understand. She said, you told me I could. Yeah. Well, I was done. That's all it took. That's all it took was just telling her, you can do this. And see, and when I'm also a certified life coach. And so the girls who want to be coached, it's not forced on them or anything. Well, she was one who took that opportunity. And so I always tell them when they take that opportunity, I'm just the person that it's a yes until it's a no. And if there's a bump in the road, we'll figure out how to kick the door down, run over the bump, whatever it takes. There is a way to make what you are wanting in a positive way. If it's something positive about your future, we'll figure it out. We'll call somebody. We'll figure it out. There's somebody in this town who's going to know something. And so they call me whenever they hit a bump, and I just say, keep going. Just keep going. And they keep going. We're so proud of her. And she's just one of many.
Yeah,
She's
95% of your residents, that is remarkable.
Yes.
I think that while I hear you say that, all you did for Beth was tell her she could, however, without having someone in Beth's pathway that did say that, it made all of the difference in the world. Exactly. And I think even to kind of like extrapolate that, Martha's home, whereas it is many things, it is a bed and it is a roof and it was a place of love and support for your, what did you call it? Immediate needs, future.
Present needs, future success.
Present needs, future success. So when we're looking at the future success portion of it though, perhaps one of the most important roles that Martha's home plays is a connector of services. And I think sometimes people fall through the cracks when they don't have someone to kind of metaphorically say, you sure can do that. And I think that the impact can't be understated of a place like Martha's home to connect people to services, to say, to answer the phone and say, keep going, baby.
Keep going. Don't stop. Don't stop. And just to, you'd be surprised at how many women, because of their life circumstances, Skylar, they quit dreaming. And here's what I tell them. Wait a second. I know that flicker is still there. Let's dig it up and let's get it flicking again. And just what, if you could do anything, what do you want to do? And then we just help them chart a path towards it. Now, we always let them know. I always let the ladies know, girl, this is going to take time. But what else you going to be doing? What else? And particularly the ladies who do have children, they do recognize that opportunity for them. Because what present needs future success does is, I want this to be very clear, it's not a scholarship program.
Yeah.
Because they're probably going to qualify for a lot of different assistance and all of that stuff, but we're not a scholarship program. But what we do is we remove the barriers. And what people don't realize is that the barriers, like if I go out here right now, if my car has a flat tire, I call my husband, he calls AAA, it's taken care of. Now, it's inconvenient.
Yeah, you're home in an hour.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. But for our ladies, they're driving 15-year-old cars that got 10-year-old tires on them. And that's an expense that just shatters their world, because now all of a sudden they can't get to work, they can't pick up their kids. Okay, well, if you're in present needs future success, if you're going to school or in a GED if you are making steps towards your future, we are going to make sure that tire gets fixed. I'll never forget our executive director. She came in the office one day and she was just like, would everybody's car just stop breaking down? Because we've got to fix it. We got to fix it. So it's that type of funding that is really important. Transportation's a big one.
It's
childcare.
huge.
Childcare. People cannot afford childcare. And although there is assistance and all of that stuff, well, when it's time to study, the daycares aren't open. That's where Martha's home comes in. We even, present needs, future success. It's not uncommon for us to have children. Homeless women come with homeless children.
Right.
We have a young man who all he's ever wanted to do was be a Marine. He was in our homeless shelter, okay? And all he ever wanted to do is be a Marine. Well, guess who provides all of his junior ROTC stuff? Martha's Home. We're going to make sure that that boy gets to the Marines, And we've had girls who have situations that happen when they're in high school. Had a young lady who lived with her grandmother. Grandmother died. Parents were not available. She ends up at Martha's Home. Well, we made sure she got to the prom. We made sure that, she got to college orientation in Jackson. That's just what we do. We're going to make sure that you get on to that future success. And then we'll stick with you as long as you want us to stick with you. And I think a lot of people think that it's money that people need. It's not always money that people need. Yeah, it's not always money.
One of the things that I hear in the way that you talk about your ladies is just a respect for them as a human.
They have taught me more than I have ever taught them. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And Martha's Home that's my job, But for 22 years, I've also been doing a lot of work with women in recovery at the Downtown Women's Center. And I'm just telling you, they teach me more than I could ever teach them. Because let me tell you what they got. Do you know how hard it would be to be homeless?
I have no clue.
Do you know how hard it would be to struggle with addiction? Or to know that people are trying to tell you that, why don't you just quit?
Right.
Don't you
just go get a job?
Yeah, those kinds of things. Well, if it was that simple, they'd be doing it, I tell people this all the time. Out of all of the women that I've met through all of these years of doing all of this that I do, I have yet to meet one who said, when I was age 4, I woke up and decided I wanted to be homeless, I wanted to be an addict, or I wanted to be abused. No, I hadn't met one, and I know I never will. Mm-hmm. But I've seen lives transformed just because they've been given an opportunity that wouldn't have come had it not been for Martha's Home, Present Needs, Future Success. Beth never, ever thought she would ever go back to school.
Of course.
She never thought she'd ever have that opportunity.
No. Homeless and pregnant.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. That's nothing, no, she never thought that. But boy, a 4.0? I'm like, wow.
It's remarkable. Mm-hmm. I heard a saying the other day that's really been sitting with me from Mary Emily. And she said,
I love her.
Yes. She said, of the old adage, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you teach him to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And she said, it's not about teaching people to fish. People know how to fish. It's about removing the fence from around the lake.
That's so good.
Man.
Yes. That's it.
And that's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You removing those barriers.
Removing the barriers.
And it's a beautiful thing.
That's what we're doing. I just know that one of the greatest joys I ever get, Skylar, it's just like, I know you're going to think this is weird, but when we were coming in here and I said to you, I'm really proud of you, that wasn't just something I say. I mean, I'm just like, wow, I'm really proud of her. I mean, look what she's doing, It gives me great joy to see other people step into what it is that they've been meant to do, their purpose, their calling, because especially when you know that what they do is going to be helping and changing other people's lives. It just gives me great joy. It really does.
Yeah. And I think it's your life's work.
I believe it is. And listen, I didn't always think that. It's only been like a year that I've really realized that. Wait a second. Yeah. it's only been like a year that I realized, wait a second, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So, but it's good. It's good.
This episode is sponsored by the Amarillo Art Institute at Arts in the Sunset. If you haven't been, this place is an amazing center for Amarillo's vibrant art scene. They have monthly events, including the First Friday Art Walk, which showcases the artists they have in residence, and these are some incredibly talented people with all sorts of wares and different mediums. They also offer classes for children and adults in things like glass blowing, weaving, and pottery. It's all so cool. Check them out on Facebook. Again, that's Arts in the Sunset. Okay, I'm back with Sharon Miner. Sharon, this is the part of the show that I call 8 Straight.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you 8 questions. You get to choose how in-depth or lack thereof you want to go and just answer these questions.
Okay.
You ready? Cool.
I'm ready.
Okay. What's your favorite local restaurant?
Ooh, girl. Delvin's.
Delvin's. What do you get there?
Whatever is on the menu. I've had their chicken, I've had their pork chop. It's just good. It reminds me of how my mom and grandma cooked and how Jerry's mom cooked. It's just good. I love Delvin's.
That's
love
perfect.
Delvin's. Mm-hmm.
It is good food.
Not to mention Delvin is a really nice guy.
Oh, okay, good. That always helps.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy.
That's great.
It's good food.
Other than wind, what does this area have too much of?
Okay, this is probably going to be a strange answer, but this is my answer. We have too many people who think they can't make a difference. Mm. I know that sounds crazy, but I just want people to get some courage and some, take a risk and just go for it. What you got to lose?
I love the pragmatism that you just walk with. Like, what else are you going to be doing?
Exactly.
I love it. Why not?
Why not?
I love that.
Risk.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, what does this area not have enough of?
Trees. Trees. We don't have enough trees.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Trees, I know that's so corny, but it's the truth.
I mean, trees are lovely.
My family, my mom's side of the family is from South Carolina.
Oh, there you go.
And so
they got trees.
You notice the difference. You notice when you go to visit, and they're from the Myrtle Beach area and all of that stuff.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And so, when I'm here, I never notice that we don't have trees. But when I go somewhere else, I'm like, we ain't got no trees.
This is different. Exactly. Something is missing.
Something is missing.
Absolutely. Sharon, what's your favorite local neighborhood?
My neighborhood.
And what is that?
My neighborhood is over it's like Country Club 2. Right off of Avondale by the Amarillo Country Club.
Okay.
Over nestled in that little area right over there not behind, I would say in front of Avondale Elementary School.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
In there. And why I like it is because I love my neighbors. We know them. We know the ones across the street, the ones next to them, the ones next to them, our next door neighbors on both sides, down the street, just that kind of thing. It's just a great neighborhood. And everybody is we look out for each other. And you do not find that. You do not find that. Just on my way here, right when I was getting ready to leave, the neighbor across the street, he comes and goes, hey, Sharon, me and Tammy, we're going to be gone for 2 weeks, that kind of thing.
Keep an eye on the house.
Yeah. And we do the same for them, so it's fun. It's fun. I love my neighborhood.
I think in addition to you don't find that everywhere, I would add, and you don't find it by accident either. Mm-hmm. I also love my neighborhood because I know my neighbors. And you don't get to know your neighbors by just leaving your car out of the back garage and driving off.
Exactly.
Yeah, go sit on the front porch.
Exactly. That's right. And talk to them.
Yes.
And that's how we started. And see, my husband is just a little social butterfly. So, he knows their names, who they mama and daddy is.
That's right.
And all of that stuff. I just know their name.
Yeah. that's great. I also have a high value for the people and place that I live. It's great. Mm-hmm. So what do you hope for Amarillo in 10 years?
I hope that we can recognize as a community, you know, a lot of times when people say community, they may be thinking about, one area of town, but whenever I say community, I think of the whole entire Amarillo community. And I'm really hoping that, 10 years from now, that I hope this is taken in the right context, that we've got younger people on our city commission, in our, doing younger people with new creative ideas, people who will recognize that we all bring a part. And when we all bring a part of the pie tastes good, And so that's what I would like to see in 10 years. I just want the Amarillo community to know that it has the potential to be so much better than it is.
With all.
With all,
yeah.
With every single person.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you describe Amarillo to people outside of the area?
Well, I don't ever have anybody really ask me about Amarillo.
Okay.
But when they do, I always describe the people, and I always talk about just how nice people are in Amarillo, Texas, I mean, for the most part, we really are nice folks, But one thing that I just want to share with you real quickly is, when I was traveling all the time with the international business consultant and flying, I always loved flying back into Amarillo. And let me tell you why. Because I think for the first time, and this was, of course, several years ago, I saw the beauty in the flatness of the land. I saw the beauty in the different patterns that you see in people's fields, and just and there it has its own beauty to it. And so not only do I describe the people, but I do tell people it's really a beautiful place. You have to look for beauty, I think. Or when I say look, I don't really mean that. I mean, you have to determine that there's beauty in everything. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And there's just something. So the next time you're flying, really pay attention to the patterns, because first of all, they're so straight and you're just like, how do they do that? I'm always wondering that,
Yeah.
But there's a beauty to this area that sunsets are absolutely incredible.
Can't beat them.
So that's what I would say about Amarillo.
Yeah, I love that. I also think that the beauty to be found in the Panhandle is like a personal one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great. What is the most underrated aspect of living here? Underrated.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I'm laughing because this is something I tell people also. The best thing about Amarillo that you don't really hear much about, it's underrated, is we got an airport. I know that sounds crazy, but you can get to Denver. You can get to Albuquerque.
100%.
You can get to Dallas. You can go places. You can even drive places.
Yeah, we're 4.5 hours from Colorado.
Exactly.
Totally.
Exactly. You want to go to the mountains, you can get there. If you want the hot, you can get there, So that's one of the things that I think is very underrated.
I just had a conversation with my colleagues in Austin because I was telling them, we're going up to Colorado in August. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's so far. And I was like, it's really not.
It's not.
Because we've got like 8 hours on you.
Exactly.
I do agree. It's for as strangely far away as it seems, we're strangely centrally located.
Exactly.
I totally get you.
Exactly.
I totally get you. Underrated for sure. Okay, finally, when was the last time you visited the Big Texan, Sharon?
Oh my gosh. The last time I visited the Big Texan, I think, was 10 years ago, which is a long time. And I just don't go to the Big Texan.
Yeah.
Never in the area. Now, I have visited with Bobby Lee.
Sure.
Since then. But
Wonderful.
the Big Texan, no, I don't. I haven't been there. Mm-mm.
Just some Amarilloans do and some don't.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think that's just all there is to it.
Yeah, exactly. Love it when I go.
Yeah.
I just don't ever go.
It's not your spot.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that concludes 8 Straight. Thank you very much. I like to wrap up by asking my guests to endorse something. What thing, activity, something to do, anything at all in our area would you endorse for people?
I just have to be honest. I would endorse people finding places to volunteer to help. And Martha's Home is a great place to come and volunteer and help. I would endorse that. Can I endorse more than one?
Sure.
I also want to really speak specifically to young people. And when I say young people, I mean people, under the age of 40, 45. Do something.
Yeah.
Do something. Just don't complain. It doesn't have to be anything, massive. Forget about how many likes you get and all of that stuff. Just do something because you can make a difference, And so I endorse all of our young people under the age of 45.
Yeah.
Because, at my age, everybody's a young person. Everybody young. But I think people can really make a difference. But Martha's Home is a great place to come and volunteer and just know that whatever you do, you're making a difference. You're making a difference.
Yeah. Sharon, thank you so much for this conversation, for the work that you do, for the difference that you make, and for the difference that the people that you help will make. And I know that you believe strongly in those ripple effects, and you have created quite a few, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us.
Skylar, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
If you're starting or growing a small business and need some cash, let me tell you about Amarillo Venture Capital. They are a Hey Amarillo sponsor. They're locally owned, and what makes them different is they don't just invest in businesses. They invest in people. So whether you need $5,000 or $50,000, they offer flexible, asset-based loans, often with funding in a week or less. And it's not just the money. They can connect you with their local network of legal, accounting, and business resources to truly help you succeed. Check them out at amarilloventurecapital.com. And that concludes the episode. Thanks so much to Sharon Miner for the interview. You can learn more about the work they do at Martha's Home and how you can support it at marthashome.org. Thanks to Amarillo Art Institution's Arts in the Sunset and Amarillo Venture Capital for supporting this episode, and to Angelina Marie for editing every week. Executive directors on this episode are Barbara and Jim Whitten. If your business is interested in supporting the podcast, you can contact us at heyamarillo.com. Thanks for listening. This has been episode 402 of Hey Amarillo. My name is Skylar Gallup, and we'll see you next week.